Hey everybody, Invisiblekatana here, and today I would like to discuss if game preservation is 100% possible. Unfortunately, I think the answer is no. And I have a crazy reasoning for this, and it's specifically because of the era that we're in right now when it comes to DLC. And I was thinking about this recently, mostly because, once again, The Last of Us is adding more things, but in this case, it's not like yet another remaster, but it was more DLC, and it's the chronological version of the story. And I thought, that's really interesting. I'm interested in playing that someday and checking it out. I personally, really enjoy the game myself. Also, I have a stream on that. If you guys want to check that out, you can watch my playthrough of it. But that got me thinking about game preservation and, of course, just the era that we're in, of course, the stop killing games thing. I've actually already done an episode on game preservation, but it's obviously come up a lot more recently with the stop killing game stuff, which has been, good news with that kind of going through. So I wanted to talk about it again because more things have happened, and it's given me more things to think about. And it made me realize, even if we go really hard into the realm of game preservation, which of course, the stop killing games thing is a different version of that. That's, for being able to play things like online and stuff, which is great. And then of course you have just having like a single player game, like The Last of Us. And it got me thinking, like, man, at this point, I wouldn't hate it if we just went back to like having multiple discs, but even that doesn't matter because we have the element of there's a bunch of games where you'll get the disc and it's like, all right, I got a physical code, but you still have to download like most of the game because pretty much nothing's on the actual disc. Some games, including The Last of Us Part 2, have game discs. I don't know if the PS5 version has that, but the PS4 version did, where it was like, hey, here's the actual data of the video game, and then you can play the game. And it was the same with Red Dead Redemption 2, I remember. And it was like, hey, here's all the data of the game, and then here's the the rest of it you can actually play. So I thought that was cool, and it was like, hey, if we can get that for games, that'd be fantastic. Bring like data disc into it. It's like, all right, well, at the very least, most games will allow you to have like the full thing on a disc, and then you put in the play disc, and then you're good to go. And then you have the element of DLC, and it's like, well, you can't really do that unless you have all the DLC on the disc. So then you have to have the complete edition. So if you bought the game, you have the actual game and everything, but then the DLC comes out and it's like, well, eventually, in however many years, you won't be able to download that DLC anymore, so it's gone. You still have to buy like the complete edition of the game. And then you could have an insane situation like The Last of Us Part 2, where even the complete version of that game, or so we thought, was the PS5 version. You get The Last of Us 2 remastered, you get the roguelike DLC, I forgot the name of it, but you get that DLC, and it's like, all right, cool, I have the whole game. And then they just put out the chronological DLC, which also comes with some costumes, and it's like, even that small little thing, it's an amazing thing to have, but that extra little piece means that at some point in the future, unless they do yet another version of The Last of Us Part 2 on disc, at some point in the future, you better have that on your PlayStation downloaded, or you will never be able to play that DLC. Because it's just not on a disc. Like, they made that way after everything was all said and done. And I doubt, even I doubt that they would put out yet another version just to be like, hey, here's the complete version with all the DLC 100%. They might, it's possible, but I kind of doubt it. But because that's not going to happen, that DLC is kind of just, up in the air, lost to the wind. Unless, somebody does some stuff, PC-wise, then who knows what happens. But that's what got me thinking about this. Like, man, is game preservation even something that we're truly capable of because of the era that we already live in with the DLC? So I don't know if it's possible. I don't think it is, unfortunately, unless you have a situation where it's like, all right, we have all the DLC, it's all said and done, here's the complete version of the game on disc. And it still has to have like the data disc, because of course, if you just have, like most games, you buy the disc, you can take that over someone's house and it's like, cool, we can play the game and stuff, but you still have to download it to the console. And eventually you won't be able to do that. It's just gonna be like, all right, well, I mean, there's, you can go to the start screen if you want. That looks cool. That's in 4K if you want to see that, but the actual game is not here anymore. And it's a very interesting spot to be in, because that's what I was talking about, even in my last preservation video, where there are a lot of things we can do, but simply because of the era that we're in, it's incredibly difficult. It gets harder and harder because, of course, we're moving in towards a more digital age. I mean, at this point, that's where we are. I mean, this is the first generation where most of my games have been digital. Like, I have a PS5, and the only game where I was like, man, I really want to get it physical has been like RE4. And I got that digital, and of course, this is like the main thing that really does it. Well, if I get digital, midnight release, that bad boy hits 12 a.m., I'm playing the video game. Ghost of Yote is coming out at the end of this year. I'm buying that digital, which once again, even if I bought physical, it wouldn't make a difference because the only thing that would allow me to do would be to take it to someone else's house so they can play it. And it's like, I don't really do that. The only thing I thought about recently was the fact that with me having Resident Evil 4 in VR, I can't take that like to my dad's house because he has a PS5. And I was like, that would be really cool to just show him, VR, but he'd have to come to my place because I have it digital. I don't have like PS4. So I couldn't just take it to his house and be like, hey, let's set, I can set up the PSVR and show you what it's like. So that was the only thing I was thinking of. Like, oh, it'd be kind of cool if I could do that, but oh, that's interesting. I have it digital. I can't do that. I'd have to take my whole PlayStation over to show him. So I thought that was interesting. Like, just one of those little things where it's like, oh, it's very rare for me to, even be thinking about that and like taking games to other places anyway. But it was something that popped into my head because I recently got into playing my PSVR too. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'd have to invite him over to show him, VR. Or he'd have to, just, get a used copy, which at this point, the game's like 2 years old. He could if he wanted to, but he's not playing games like that anyway. And I'm not going to buy another copy just to be like, here's VR. So it's an interesting thing, the digital era that we're in, where it's easier to get games. It's, of course, faster to play them because, like I said, midnight release is actually midnight release. It hits 12 a.m. You can play that game right now. You're up and running, you're ready to go. And that's a really good incentive. Like, you can play the game as soon as it's released. You don't have to go to, you don't go to sleep, get up in the morning, drive to wherever you pre-ordered the game from, get the game, and then come back home. It's like, nope, it's there right now. Like, even if you go to sleep, you can wake up and boom, it's there. It's ready for you. You can even pre-download games now. It's like, it's 100% ready. It's not like you download at midnight. It's like, hey, you want to pre-download the game like 48 hours in advance? It's just locked. You can't play it, but it's already set to jet. As soon as midnight hits, you're ready to play. And it's like, that's convenient. It's convenient, and it's genuinely better because you get to play the game as soon as possible. And that's, of course, what we all want, especially if you're pre-ordering games and stuff like that. You want it as soon as possible. And that's just an interesting thing. And there's some cases, you have your not so midnight releases where it'll be like, 9 p.m. and then the game's technically allowed to be played. And I've had that happen. I remember Resident Evil 7 was like that, where I went to GameStop, I had it pre-ordered, I went there after work, and it was like, all right, here you go. And I was able to play it technically the day before it came out. So there are definitely times where that happens. I think, even the Switch 2, when it recently came out, technically it came out like Thursday at 9. I think that's how they did it. So, in some places at least you can do that. But it's an interesting, weird situation that we're in where you have lots of things that can be preserved, which I would love every video game to be preserved if possible. I would love that personally because obviously I'm a nerd talking about video game preservation. It matters. So I would love all games to be preserved. I would love it if there was a way to just be like, hey, what if I just want to play like Toy Story 2 on the PlayStation? Which is a really great game. I've said this a couple of times. For some odd reason, the Toy Story video games are like God tier. They're all really, really good. Like, it's insane. But can't really play them unless you got it. I have my Super Nintendo copy of the first game, but that's about it. I can play it on my Super Nintendo. If I got, the Retron? I forgot what they're called, but like the old retro system, so you can play your old games. If I got one of those, I can still do it. Maybe somebody somehow put, an emulated version online. Not that it's that crazy. I mean, there's so many things that have been emulated at this point. I wouldn't be shocked if, Toy Story from the Super Nintendo was online somewhere. But outside of those situations, which can be taken down, people can come after people for that stuff. We kind of just have to wonder, like, what do we do? Even if we do, like I said, the physical game disc, that was the main thing where it's like, hey, just put the whole game on the disc. It would still be a step up from where we are. At the very least, you'd have the base game, and that's at least something, to have the full base game on the actual disc compared to what we have now where, you get like 5 megabytes of a game and then the rest of it you have to download. But even then, like I said, in the age of DLC that we're in now, who knows when the last piece of DLC comes out and it's like, well, do you get a complete edition? Is that all going to be on the disc? Is it even possible? Heck, we've had this happen what was that? Borderlands 2 actually did that. Borderlands 2 has a Game of the Year edition, which is all the DLC, except for one piece of DLC, because they made yet another piece of DLC after they did the Game of the Year edition, which has like, I mean, they did so much DLC for 2. It was like 100 million things came out for that game. And then they still made another one that you have to buy separately. Even on Steam, if you buy the Game of the Year edition of Borderlands 2, you still have to buy that last piece of DLC separately because it's not a part of that bundle. It's crazy. But they did that a super long time ago. And I mean, heck, we weren't even talking about this sort of stuff back then. But of course, once again, that goes back to the DLC element of it. Even if you bought the Game of the Year edition, I don't know if all that stuff was on the disc. You know, like just because you buy a complete edition doesn't mean you're getting anything different than had you bought the game, you know, normally. You can still just be like, hey, here's the game, and then you just download everything that's there. You download the whole game, you download all the DLC, but you got the disc and the license for it. But it doesn't make that much of a difference because at some point, once again, if the servers go down, how am I going to play 90% of this game? I mean, they literally have little check markers on the PlayStation when you download stuff where it says ready to play. That's the era we're in. It'll literally tell you how much of this game is downloaded and how much of it you can actually play right now. Like when we get to this point, you can actually turn the game on and play it now, but there's still more downloading in the background. If that's where we are, how do we preserve that? How can we get companies to be like, hey, here's the actual game on the disc? Honestly, if we went back to the old school, like PS1 style, like, you know, you get Final Fantasy VII on 4 discs, I'd be fine with that. You want to charge $80 for games? Give me 4 effing discs. I'll pay for that. I would pay $80 if it meant I got the whole effing game. It would still suck because, like I said, the DLC element would be there. But if I felt more confident that I could buy a game physically and actually have it, that would mean a lot more to me. Because that's why that's where that digital realm comes from. Because we have that big argument where it's like, hey, you know, if you buy physical, we'll get physical, but the physical is just a license. It doesn't really matter. The game's not there. It's a game. It's a spot that's taking up. I mean, heck, the Switch 2 is the perfect example. I think that is something that people have paid a lot more attention to because, you know, it's the newest thing. Where it's like, oh, you get the game key cards or whatever, and it's like, all right, so it's a digital download. It's not really physical, but it's a digital thing. But you can, you know, at least trade it and stuff like that. But it's still like, oh, I'd rather just have the actual game instead of having a download code. This is stupid. But that's what we have. That's what everything is, for the most part. You know, I mean, there are some games where it's on the disc, but for the most part, what Nintendo is doing, where everybody's like, oh, this is dumb, like these game key cards, that's what you're doing anyway. Even when you buy a disc, it's the same thing. Honestly, I feel like a lot of people may not realize that, but unfortunately, that is where we are, whether it's, you know, Nintendo, PlayStation, or Xbox, which obviously it doesn't even matter with Xbox because everything's an Xbox. They're going on digital anyway. It doesn't matter with them. But that's how it's been. It's been that way for a minute. And I feel like that's the element that a lot of people haven't realized. We've been there for a while now. I think even on, you know, PS4, I mean, that's why it was such a big deal when like Red Dead did it, because it was like, hey, here's a data disc. And then The Last of Us did it, and it was like, here's the data disc and here's the play disc. Because games don't do that. Games are just, honestly, the CD is exactly the same as the Switch key cards. It's the exact same thing. You think that it's like a physical thing, but when you put a game in, you're downloading, right? It's exactly the same, guys. Like it's been that way for over a generation at this point. Depending on how you look at, you know, obviously Nintendo always puts theirs out kind of differently, but if we're counting it from PS4 even to PS5, and now if we're going, you know, Wii U to Switch 2, for over a generation, it's already been like that. You have to download stuff. We've already been there. We've been there for a minute. And I like the fact that Nintendo's being called out for it. I wish people realized that that's where everything else is, though. They just call it something else because, you know, it's Nintendo. It's like, hey, we'll just call it a different thing. The Nintendo key cards are exactly the same as getting a regular physical disc. In most cases. I don't know, you know, the percentage of what game is like the full thing and what isn't, but I couldn't tell you the last time I bought a game and it started. Like, if I'm being totally honest, I don't remember the last time I bought a game and it was just like, here's the game, and it turned on. Even if we're not counting, you know, like day one patches. I mean, heck, that's another thing. A day one patch, you don't, regardless of what we get, you know, element number 3, I guess, regardless of what we have, you have all the data on the disc and everything. that day one patch, how much of the game is being saved from that day one patch? Obviously, that depends on the game. It depends on the company. But there's always something. And obviously, as one of the common things is mentioned when we talk about the modern gaming era, you can put out a game that's not 100% finished. You can put out a game and be like, hey, early reviews come out. Oh, we already know about that. Don't worry, day one patch. Well, if that's the day one patch, and eventually 10 years from now there are no downloadable patches, the servers are down, well, I'm dealing with all these bugs and stuff that are trash. Once again, that depends on the game, and also it's about to rain insanely hard. I'm sure you'll be able to hear it, but we're in an interesting era when it comes to not just game preservation, but how we can even solve the problem of game preservation, because there are so many different elements that affect it beyond just, hey, we don't have like the full game on the disc. Well, even if you do, we live in the era of DLC. Like, I have to buy the 18th version of Street Fighter 6 to have everything on the disc. If it's, heck, even then, I don't think it'll all be on the disc. It'll just be like the license for it. So it's interesting. I just wanted to throw that out there because it was another thing I thought of. I hate that it's raining right now because I was about to end the video anyway, but I would love to know your thoughts on this. Like, what is the magic solution? Because unfortunately, the only thing I could think of is every company, and they're not going to do this because this will cost them money. And of course, we're not going to buy it. Like, if we're being totally blunt, it's raining even harder now, of course. But if we're being totally blunt, you bought the game already. Most likely. Not everyone's going to be like, well, I'll just wait for like the super duper deluxe edition with all the DLC on the disc. Most people aren't going to do that. So companies aren't going to do that. It's like an unfortunate cycle where we don't want to wait. Heck, just, if we could go back to just waiting and the games came out completely done, I'd be more than happy to wait. I would be more than happy to wait for that. But that's not going to happen. We live in the DLC age. They're going to finish a game or finish it as much as they need to do a day one patch. And then a year later, if the game's popular enough, we got some DLC you can pay for. And then a year after that, you might have the complete edition, but it's still not going to be on the disc. It's an unfortunate situation that we're kind of stuck in. If games all just happen to be thrown on PC and you can just download all the files, hey, I'm fine with that. I recently got 3 beautiful Transformers games downloaded in some way, shape, and or form that I don't think I can discuss. But man, oh man, they look good in 4K, let me tell you. War for Cybertron, Fall of Cybertron, and Transformers Devastation on my PC. It's a good time to be alive. But preservation for other games is also very important. So I would love to see that happen. There are a lot of games out there that you just can't get. Heck, with Transformers Devastation, you can't get that anymore. Heck, all 3 of the Transformers games, you can't get those, but Devastation was done by Platinum Games. That game is gone. The Legend of Korra game that Platinum did is gone. No one cares, but Babylon's Fall is gone. That game was just really bad and unfortunate. But the Ninja Turtles game they did, when they were doing like their licensed trilogy of games where it was Transformers, Ninja Turtles, then Legend of Korra, all of those games got delisted. And that's really unfortunate. Unless you buy the physical disc, you can't get them. And Legend of Korra never even came out physical. So unless you know someone that already had that game downloaded, you cannot play that game. Like, I don't think I'll ever be able to play that unless I magically find the files online. But who knows if that's even remotely possible. If it is, you can put some comments down in the comment section below. But either way, I would love to know your thoughts on how we can truly save video games. How do we do game preservation in the era that we're in, where there's so much to it that stops us from having everything on the disc? You can have the whole base game, then there's DLC, there's day one patches, all of these different elements. How do we put all that stuff together and preserve video games? Is it even possible at this point? Like, honestly, it would probably be like another 10, 15 years where it's nerds like me at the top. Because let's be honest, the most recent gaming news is the Ubisoft stuff where it's like, yeah, my son who worked on NFT games, he's totally the next guy in line. That's great. That's great, Ubisoft. Let's see what you guys do with that one. So, maybe it'll be great. I like to have hope. I always want video games to do well. But also, facts are facts, and we've seen everything that's happened with Ubisoft. So, we'll see what happens there. But I would love to know your thoughts. What can we do when it comes to game preservation? Not everything can just be, scanned and tossed up online. Unfortunately, that, it's not that easy. If it was, I'd be playing Ninja Gaiden Black right now. But unfortunately, it's not, that simple. But I would love to know, like, what you guys think about it. Like, just all the different little factors where it's like, well, we could do this. It's like, but that doesn't change the DLC element. Well, we could do this, but it doesn't change the fact that, the game's not always on the disc, day one patches and stuff like that. I would love to know your thoughts with just all the little pieces of the puzzle that we can work on. There's always like some extra thing. So I would love to know your thoughts. I know this one's kind of a bit of a downer, but if you have like a magical solution that we can start to work towards, I'd love to hear it. I would genuinely, just in general, I want to hear everyone's ideas and thoughts on that, with game preservation being an important thing, because there's so many unfortunate elements of it where, there's so many games that have been lost and everything like that. So I would love to know your thoughts. It's obviously, like I said, it's been a big topic the last couple of weeks with the Stop Killing Games initiative, but that's just on the side of like, hey, don't turn off digital stuff. Let us play online. But there are so many other elements of just games existing in general, just even in a physical version of a video game. How do we keep that stuff maintained when like 90% of games now are like, all right, yeah, here's 5% of a game, and the other 95% you have to download? Like, how do we even get a solution from that with the ease of digital, the new generation coming in of gamers, and just people in general? Digital is easier. Like I said, I'm guilty of it too. The first time I've really done it, where most of my PS5 games I'm buying digital, unless I got like an insane sale or something, or it was Astrobot. I was like, no, I'm celebrating. That was my celebration for their 30th anniversary. I bought Astrobot. I didn't have the money for a PS5 Pro. I was like, I'll buy Astrobot physical. That'll be my celebration for PlayStation. But we'd love to know your thoughts, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.